Your father was poisoned. I would say heavy doses over a short period, and yes, it would have affected his mind in the later stages.
Yes, and sewn back up into one piece.
I would recommend they dig a bit deeper this time.
You tell every member of your profession, I know things about the dead, and I will know.
He was known as the last true hard man of Britain, someone who could play both Britain and America however he wanted. Born into a family rich enough to rival entire nations, he chose instead to leave it all behind and work in Africa, disappearing for 10 years. And just when everyone believed he had died out there, this nightmare finally broke open, and he returned to claim what was his father's inheritance, a legacy powerful enough to shift the balance of war between Britain and America after leaving the church. Tom tracked down his father's lawyer, Joseph, and through him discovered that the inheritance was a piece of land called Nootka Sound, a territory desired by multiple powerful forces. During the funeral, Tom whispered in a language no one could understand while rubbing a strange powder across his face. His unsettling actions drew the attention of a beautiful woman nearby. She was his half-sister, and just a day earlier she had been considered the sole heir to the estate. Her husband had already negotiated a deal with the powerful East India Company, but under British law, a son takes priority over a daughter, and with Tom's sudden return, that entire agreement was immediately void. Tom's arrival once again drew the attention of powerful groups, and after digging into the mystery of his missing 10 years, they reached a conclusion disturbing, unnatural, and likely false. That same night, Tom returned to his father's old home where he met the servant who had raised him. This man had now become the only person Tom could trust. Nootka Sound is cursed, and I have sworn to do something very foolish. The following day, Tom went to his father's former office, but just before entering, he was stopped by a woman who had taken over the building after his father's death, turning it into a brothel. When she realized Tom intended to take back the place,
I have girls, but I also have men. They're not very good men. You understand? They've rocks for hearts. They've knives and ropes. If you have any sense.
Tom received an invitation to the East India Company where he met Stuart, the chairman of Global Affairs. Stuart immediately made it clear he wanted to buy the land from Tom, but Tom refused. Without hesitation, seeing that Tom couldn't be swayed, Stuart finally snapped and lost his composure. Why don't you just open the music envelope, good day? Tom then hired 2 gravediggers to dig up his father's body and brought in a medical examiner to determine the true cause of death. What no one realized was that during his 10 years in Africa, Tom had endured unimaginable suffering, a kind of torment that also granted him access to ancient and forbidden shamanic abilities. You are not here, so do not stand there. I have work to do after completing the examination. The doctor revealed that Tom's father had not died naturally, but instead from consuming a massive amount of poison. In a short time, Tom paid the doctor 3 silver coins and ordered him to bury the body again, warning that if it was ever used for any other purpose, he would track him down and kill him.
I know things about the dead.
Tom's next move was to settle his father's debts. Behold, 215 pounds and 17 shillings form a proper line. At that moment, a pale and striking woman approached him, introducing herself as his father's widow, making her Tom's stepmother. Even though they had never met, she produced documents to support her claim. Realizing what this meant, the lawyer quickly escorted her to his office, because if the documents were confirmed, she would legally receive half of the inheritance. News of this reached the East India Company, who monitored everything. After their failed attempt to purchase the port, her arrival reignited their hopes. Lawyer Joseph soon delivered the confirmation they had been waiting for. A message from Dublin verified that the marriage was real and legally recognized. Bravo, an actress sent to rescue the mighty East, but to succeed she would need to file a lawsuit, and her chances of winning remained slim, though the situation could soon escalate. The following day, Tom noticed that the white horse tied outside his door had been stolen, and the bold thief had even left his name behind. Tom immediately recognized it, Atticus. Soon after, a man by that name appeared, infamous as London's most feared executioner, a man who would kill anyone for the right price. He revealed that someone had paid him to take his father's life, standing exactly where Tom now stood. Recognizing his usefulness, Tom chose to hire him instead, bringing 2 dangerous men together. That night, Tom sensed someone trailing him, and when he turned around, he saw it was a young girl she had overheard that a man called Big Silver Fang was planning to attack him. She guided Tom to the ship where Silver Fang was supposed to be to avoid drawing attention. Tom anchored his boat at a distance and swam to the vessel, but when he climbed aboard, the man was nowhere to be found since he had already made it there. Tom refused to leave empty-handed, pouring fuel across the floor before setting the ship on fire. When he returned to his boat, the girl had vanished. The next day, Tom went to visit Hagar, the brothel owner, to gather information. She claimed she did not know where Big Silver Fang was, but she did know who he worked for, following her lead. Tom went to the address she provided where he encountered Dr. Barton, a surgeon with a suspiciously aware expression. Tom immediately exposed Barton's true identity as an American spy operating inside Britain. When Barton asked what Tom wanted, he answered plainly, "I want a direct line of communication with the President of the 15 states of America faced with a double-barreled shotgun." Even someone like Tom had no choice but to back off on his way back. Another attempt was made on his life. A man disguised as an ordinary passerby tried to catch him off guard, but Tom saw through the act instantly. The man then threatened a woman and began stripping her down, simply because she owned land so valuable it could make anyone rich. He promised her enormous wealth if she signed over ownership, but she refused, saying she had been told to wait for a better offer. The following day, a body was discovered on the shore. It was Big Silver Fang, the same man who had tried to kill Tom and was killed instead to send a clear warning to other assassins and discourage them from working with the East India Company. Tom removed Silver Fang's heart. At the same time, Tom regained consciousness after being treated by Dr. Barton, acting as a representative of the United States. Barton tried to convince him to sell the land to America, but when Tom refused, Barton resorted to torture, only to realize he had badly underestimated him. When force failed, Barton switched tactics and tried negotiation, instead asking what Tom really wanted. "You can tell Callsby that I want a monopoly." He should have said that. From the beginning, after returning home, Tom treated his injuries and realized from the assassination attempt that every faction involved was now becoming desperate. He instructed his servant to deliver a letter to the British royal family offering to hand over the port to the nation. Meanwhile, the East India Company received a document from Lawyer John. It was Tom's will, and it clearly stated that if he died, the port would be transferred directly to the United States, as a gift, making it clear that it was now in their urgent interest to keep him alive. Not long afterward, an important visitor arrived at Tom's old house as his father's widow. She had successfully secured half ownership of the port, along with half of the estate, with no way to stop her. Tom allowed her to remain later while his stepmother was preparing to return home. After a performance, she was approached by a woman claiming to be an admirer. The woman invited her to visit her idol's residence, but once they left, it became clear the invitation had hidden intentions. A duke had taken an interest in her, and they were now heading directly to his estate. The carriage eventually came to a halt, and as she stepped out, she was immediately seized and brought before the overweight duke. "You will wear it for me tonight. There seems to be some confusion. I am the Duke of Richmond. This is the gallows before Mass." Tom quickly realized this was all part of a scheme orchestrated by the royal family. By placing her in this position, they could have her arrested and force her to give up her claim to the land just as expected. The next morning, royal guards arrived at the house. "What is happening? You must hold out. You will endure. Look at me. I will alert the East India Company and they will come for you. Hold out." And with that, Tom's stepmother was taken away. This brings the story back to the beginning. Just as the men were about to act against her, agents from the East India Company suddenly intervened. They were the only force in London capable of opposing the royal family. If the stepmother signed over her rights, they would lose access to Nootka Sound entirely. Tom understood this and used it to his advantage, allowing her to escape. Because of this incident, she fully grasped the situation she was in and chose not to oppose Tom for control of the port, instead deciding to join forces with him against their common enemies. That evening, Tom and his stepmother attended a formal gathering where he encountered his half-sister and her husband. The man held deep resentment toward Tom because his return had stripped his wife of her inheritance. Furious, he confronted Tom, but Tom easily grabbed him and dragged him out of the room like he weighed nothing. Realizing he was about to humiliate himself in front of everyone, the man tried to regain his dignity by issuing a formal challenge.
"I declare it. I challenge James Delaney to a duel at dawn to the death."
To which Tom coldly replied, "It would seem my life holds more value than yours." After learning that reselling gunpowder could bring in huge profits, Tom sought out a gunpowder maker and threw his remaining silver coins to a man named George, asking him to work for him. George, who had barely ever seen money, eagerly agreed. The following day, the two traveled to a secluded farm where they planned to produce gunpowder. George began by inspecting materials, even tasting cow dung and chewing pigeon droppings. They also required 200 liters of urine as part of the process, but the most difficult element to obtain was saltpeter. With tensions rising between Britain and America, all saltpeter supplies were strictly controlled by the British royal family, making it nearly impossible to acquire. The only known supply left was stored inside the East India Company's warehouse after sending George ahead. Tom prepared to head back to town, but his white horse suddenly refused to move, no matter how much he pulled. Its behavior immediately alerted Tom to danger. As he carefully moved forward, a large man suddenly appeared and struck him. Without warning, the two fought, but Tom was eventually overpowered. The next day, Tom returned to Hager's brothel, where he could solve the issue of gathering urine for production. He instructed Hager to send her girls to the farm, and told them to drink plenty of water. Afterward, Tom tracked down Atticus and told him plainly that he was planning a robbery that night. One of Hager's girls approached the warehouse door using charm to distract the guards, while at the same time another girl locked the security guard inside his break room from the outside with Hager's assistants Atticus and the rest slipped into the courtyard, quietly carrying containers as they approached the storage area where the saltpeter was kept. Keep moving. Go. The operation was a success and the warehouse was completely looted when news reached the East India Company. They were furious knowing that only one man in London would dare pull something like this. Soon a massive bounty was placed on Tom with a huge reward promised to anyone who could track him down, drawing countless hunters to search for him. The first man who managed to track Tom followed him deep into the wilderness but quickly lost him around a corner.
Are you king or are you company? It doesn't matter.
Tom immediately severed the man's artery before walking away, making it clear what happened to those who came after him to make sure no one even considered betraying him. Tom chose to establish complete dominance after all the bounty placed on him by the East India Company was far too tempting. He openly declared that he already knew who among them would betray him.
I know which one of you it is, and I want you to know, because he will be of no use to me. He will be of no...
I am already inside your hand. Gentlemen, afterward, Tom returned to Hager's brothel where he made his warning even clearer, first presenting half of a severed thumb before pulling out a diamond and letting them choose their fate. Yet even with this, there were still those who, driven by the bounty, were not afraid to die. At this turning point in the conflict between Britain and America, gunpowder became the most valuable strategic resource for both sides, and Tom, being one of the few capable of producing it, quickly became the center of attention. Soon American spy Barton approached him bringing news from the front lines that their forces only had enough gunpowder left for 10 more days. However, if Tom as an Englishman supplied them, it would be considered outright treason. Just as Tom was preparing to refuse, Barton revealed his leverage by stating the exact location of Tom's gunpowder operation. It became clear that Barton's agents had already infiltrated Tom's circle, and if pushed, he could expose everything to the British royal family, which would guarantee Tom's execution for treason in exchange for safe passage to America. Tom agreed to the deal, but demanded that the gunpowder be completed within 8 days. He then turned to his chemist George, who explained that meeting such a deadline would require adding chlorides, but this made the mixture extremely unstable. It would need to be stirred constantly 24 hours a day with perfect precision because even the slightest disturbance could trigger an explosion. When asked where they would obtain the chloride, Tom chose to take the risk and ordered George to begin working on it. The following day, Tom brought in workers to rotate shifts stirring the gunpowder continuously to maintain stability, with everyone working day and night. Without rest, they successfully completed the first batch to move the gunpowder out of London and deliver it to the front lines. Barton used his influence to spread a false report claiming that 6 people had died from cholera, as cover a convoy carrying 50 tons of gunpowder soon departed and reached the city gates under the cover of darkness. Even though Tom warned the guards that the carts contained infected bodies, they still insisted on carrying out a routine inspection outside the gates Barton had already been waiting for some time after the delivery was complete. Tom issued a warning telling him that if his operation was ever exposed, he would know exactly where to find him. The next morning, the East India Company received alarming news. The owner of the farm, motivated by the bounty, had reported Tom's treasonous activities. None of them noticed their secretary Frey sitting nervously nearby after the meeting. He rushed to Tom and revealed everything that had been discussed. Tom calmly responded that he would handle it, and told him to go home immediately afterward. Tom went to the factory and ordered everyone to relocate the gunpowder at once, but George resisted, pointing out how unstable the mixture was. Tom ignored the concern, and insisted they leave immediately because they had already been betrayed. At the same time, in a church, a priest began hearing his first confession of the day, while Tom had already secretly transported the gunpowder by water, leaving the East India Company's men with nothing in retaliation. They destroyed Tom's only ship, which had been under the protection of Atticus's men. That night, Tom confronted Atticus, demanding an explanation, telling him the ship had been his responsibility and that the consequences would follow in anger. Tom went to the riverbank to clear his mind, accompanied by Hager's daughter Winter, who had brought him wine after drinking. Tom passed out and slept through the night, but when he woke up, he found Winter dead. He watched from a distance as others prayed over her body, fully aware that Hager would now believe he was responsible whether he truly was or not. And as expected, the following day, Hager went to the East India Company and exposed everything about Tom supplying gunpowder to the Americans, openly accusing him of treason. After hearing the news, Frey rushed to inform Tom, but Tom had already expected it. He went to a tavern and quietly passed a message to an actor soon after Royal Special Forces arrived and arrested him on charges of treason under British law. Once someone confesses to treason, all their property is seized by the state, meaning Nootka Sound would immediately fall into royal hands to force a confession. They subjected Tom to brutal torture while keeping a doctor nearby to ensure he stayed alive. But Tom knew that if he broke, he would lose everything. He demanded a meeting with Stewart, the chairman of the East India Company, and promised that afterward he would confess, faced with a man who seemed immune to pain. They had no choice but to agree when Stewart entered the cell. Tom turned the situation around, threatening him and demanding that all charges be dropped and that Hager be released. He also demanded a ship to leave Britain 10 years earlier. Stewart had been involved in illegal slave trading, and during one voyage, a disaster had killed over 100 slaves at sea. Tom had been the only survivor. If this secret were exposed, the East India Company would be destroyed. You have 4 hours. Back at headquarters, Stewart immediately ordered his men to fulfill Tom's demands. Hager and her companion were escorted out of the city and handed over to Atticus, who eliminated them to clean up loose ends. Meanwhile, Tom walked free from prison with all charges removed as long as Barton provided safe passage. He would be able to leave Britain on a ship supplied by the East India Company. However, Barton revealed his true intentions, demanding that Tom trade Nootka Sound in exchange for his escape. It became clear that Barton was not just an American agent, but also working for the East India Company as a double agent, loyal to Stewart. In the end, Barton met a brutal fate, while Tom's allies gathered supplies and prepared for departure, waiting only for the company's ship to arrive. At that moment, one of Stewart's trusted men delivered the travel documents. Meanwhile, the Royal Regent had already issued a death sentence for Tom, but Tom had planned for everything. He ordered his men to prepare an ambush and get ready for battle. Soon, British Special Forces stormed the docks, and with a violent explosion, Tom's war against the royal family officially began. They defended the gates, holding back wave after wave of soldiers as everyone, men, women, young and old, joined the fight. Even George, who had once been timid, now fought fiercely. Tom and Atticus dragged him along as they rushed toward the ship, but the soldiers blocked the only path forward just as everything seemed lost. The ship slowly began to pull away. Thanks to the group's efforts, at the same time, Stewart received a package sent by Barton, believing he had won it all. America then on to Delaney. In the end, the truth was revealed. The gunpowder had never been for America. We are Americans.